The hum of the Galactic Federation Council chamber was usually a wailed symphony of muted clicks, soft whirs, and the almost imperceptible rustle of energy fields. Teddy, however, an entirely different sound filled the vast, crystalline space, a collective, stunned silence. On the central holographic display, usually vibrant with complex galactic charts and bustling trade routes, hung a single, stark image. It was a ship, unmistakably so, yet unlike any vessel known to the Federation's countless species. It wasn't the sleek, predatory curves of a Cathar dreadnought, nor the organic, luminous forms of a raw, diplomatic cruiser, and certainly not the geometrically perfect, shimmering structures of a Xylos explorer. This ship, small and dark against the nebulous distant glow, was utilitarian, functional. It possessed a blunt, almost defiant simplicity that whispered of purpose over elegance. Its designation, flickering beneath it, read, solitary. And below that, human vessel, Speaker Xylos, a venerable Varal with 6 shimmering, articulated limbs, was the first to break the profound quiet. His voice, usually a resonant purr, was a strained rasp. Just one ship? Why? Why did the humans send just one ship? The question hung in the air, echoing the bewildered thoughts of every delegate present. Humanity was a known, if somewhat enigmatic, species within the Federation's purview. They were relatively young on the galactic stage, having only made formalized contact a mere 2 centuries prior. Their technological progress was rapid, almost alarmingly so. But their presence in galactic affairs had always been cautious, measured, and always accompanied by the expected diplomatic entourages and protective escorts. Yet here, now, was the solitary, alone, hovering at the very edge of Federation territory, a silent, dark anomaly. On board the Solitary, Captain Eva Rostova watched the Council's reaction through a flickering, slightly delayed comlink. Her bridge was compact, Spartan, devoid of the flashy holographic displays common in Federation vessels. Physical buttons, solid levers, and real tactile screens adorned the consoles. The only light came from the soft glow of her own instrumentation. In the distant nebula, outside the main viewport, a swirling canvas of purple and gold. Her face, framed by dark, closely cropped hair, was calm. Too calm, perhaps, for a human on the precipice of such an unprecedented act. Her eyes, a startling shade of blue, seemed to hold a distant, almost melancholic resolve. Beside her, Lieutenant Jian Li, the ship's comms officer, fidgeted with a loose cable, his brow furrowed with a mixture of anticipation and unease. "They're trying to hail us on every frequency, Captain," he reported, his voice low. "Standard diplomatic, emergency, even some older pre-Federation protocols, all automated, of course. No direct voice link yet." Rostova simply nodded. "Give them a few more moments to process. Let the silence speak." The silence in the vast chambers of the Federation Council was indeed speaking volumes. The delegates, from the shimmering, amorphous gloom of Xyler to the rigid, crystalline structures of the Krill, all found themselves unnerved by the audacity of a single, small human vessel appearing without warning. It was either an act of profound ignorance, which seemed unlikely given humanity's rapid ascent, or an act of calculated, chilling intent. Finally, a direct, secured channel blinked open on the Solitary's main screen. Speaker Xylos, his multiple eyes narrowed, appeared. Human vessel Solitary, his voice boomed, amplified by the Council chamber's acoustics. "This is Speaker Xylos of the Galactic Federation Council. Your unannounced presence within Federation-protected space is a severe violation of interstellar law. State your purpose immediately and explain why you approach our territory without escort or prior diplomatic clearance." "Why, Captain? Did your species send just one ship?" Rostova met his gaze, her calm unbroken. Her reply, when it came, was broadcast not just to the speaker, but to every active council member, every ship in the Federation Armada, and indeed, to every sentient being within range of their vast communication network. Her voice, clear and surprisingly warm, resonated with an underlying current of steel. Speak Azelos, esteemed delegates of the Galactic Federation. My name is Captain Eva Rostova. I am the sole human crew member aboard the Solitary. We are not an advanced scout. We are not a diplomatic envoy in the traditional sense. We are, in fact, the delivery mechanism for a message of profound significance. A tremor ran through the council chamber. Speaker Xylos leaned forward, his bioluminescent skin pulsating with agitation. A message could possibly warrant such a breach of protocol. And why, Captain? Just one vessel for such a task? Rostova's gaze drifted momentarily to a small, almost invisible data port on her console. The Solitary, she continued, her voice gaining a quiet intensity, is carrying the complete, unredacted, and unencrypted archives of human history, its culture, and technological advancements. Every war, every peace treaty, every scientific discovery, every work of art, every philosophical treatise, every mundane conversation, every moment of triumph, every agonizing failure. It is a data trove so vast, it would take your most advanced processing units centuries, perhaps millennia, to fully categorize and comprehend. A collective gasp, or its alien equivalent, rippled through the council. Speaker Xylos looked utterly dumbfounded. Such an act was beyond audacious. It was an information bomb. Its deliberate, unencrypted release of such a vast amount of data could, theoretically, overload and corrupt even their robust information networks. It was a digital tsunami. Then came the second, equally shocking part of her message. Furthermore, Rostova stated, her eyes locking back onto the speaker. Humanity formally declares its withdrawal from all existing galactic treaties, alliances, and trade agreements. We are not declaring war. Let that be unequivocally clear. This is not an act of aggression. This is a declaration of self-sufficiency, of independence. We are retracting our presence from the Federation's jurisdiction, and we are severing all formal ties. The council erupted. Cacophony of alien languages, indignant shouts, and the frantic clicking of communication devices filled the chamber. Delegates rose from their seats, some gesturing wildly, others simply staring in disbelief. A unilateral withdrawal of this magnitude was unprecedented. It was a seismic shift in galactic politics. Humanity, a relatively minor power, was essentially declaring itself sovereign and completely autonomous. It's a move almost universally considered impossible without facing overwhelming Federation retaliation. Yet, Captain Rostova remained utterly composed amidst the digital storm, her face unreadable. She had made her declaration, delivered her unsettling cargo of data, and now she waited. The silence of the Solitary had given way to the thunder of the Federation's shock, and the first ripples of an unseen tide were already beginning to spread across the galaxy. The question, why just one ship, had transformed in an instant from simple curiosity into a chilling, existential dilemma. What could possibly give this lone human in her solitary vessel such immense, unshakable confidence in the face of an entire galactic power? The answer, whatever it was, promised to be deeply unsettling. The roar within the Galactic Federation Council chamber intensified, cacophony of enraged, chittering, vibrating vocalizations, and high-frequency clicks that threatened to shatter the very crystalline structure of the room. Speaker Xylos, his 6 limbs trembling with a mixture of shock and fury, pounded a control panel, its surface rippling with the impact. Silence. He boomed, his amplified voice cutting through the din, but only momentarily. The delegates, accustomed 2 centuries of predictable diplomacy and strict adherence to protocols, were beyond mere indignation. This was an affront of unprecedented scale, an act of sheer, bewildering defiance from a species they had only recently admitted into their carefully constructed interstellar order, a unilateral declaration of withdrawal delivered by a single human on a solitary, almost insultingly plain ship. Carrying an unfathomable amount of undocumented data, it was an assault on their very understanding of galactic relations. A delegate from the crystalline Krill delegation, its facets flashing with agitated light, projected its concern directly onto the central display. This is an act of war, disguised as withdrawal. The data, it could be malicious, a virus, a destabilizing agent. From the gloom of Siler, a deep, resonating hum echoed, a sound that typically signified a profound agreement, but now vibrated with existential alarm. The essence of their concern was clear. The very concept was illogical. A violation of every principle upon which the Federation was founded. On the solitary, Captain Eva Rostova watched the chaotic outburst with a detached air, her blue eyes reflecting the distant nebula. Lieutenant Jian Li, despite his usual composure, swallowed hard. "Captain," he murmured, "there comes a redlining. They're demanding clarification, demanding we halt any further transmissions, threatening, well, everything." Rostova simply raised an eyebrow, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture. "Let them demand. Our course is set." She gestured to the data port, her fingers hovering over a single, unmarked button. "Initiate the primary upload. Full spectrum, unsecured. Let their networks absorb the truth of us, unedited, unformatted, for their consumption." Jian Li hesitated for a fraction of a second, the weight of the command settling heavily upon him. He knew the implications, the sheer scale of the data they carried. It wasn't just files, it was the essence of a species, raw and unfiltered. But he trusted his captain, a trust forged in silent moments and shared burdens that few outsiders could comprehend. With a deep breath, he pressed a button. A silent, invisible torrent erupted from the solitary. Billions upon billions of terabytes. A data stream so vast and complex it shimmered even in the vacuum of space, began to flood the Federation's meticulously organized networks. The central holographic display in the council chamber, which had moments ago shown the solitary vessel, now fractured into 1,000 splintered images. A child's drawing of a sun, a grim battlefield from Earth's ancient history, a complex blueprint for a fusion reactor, a poet's handwritten verse, the swirling chaos of a hurricane, the delicate structure of a human hand. The Federation's advanced AI processing units, designed for elegant, logical data, for the precise categorization of known phenomena, were instantly overwhelmed. Their internal diagnostics flashed red, then amber, then a frantic, pulsating green as they struggled to identify, to sort, to simply contain the incoming deluge. Speaker Zelos watched in horrified fascination as his own personal console, usually a beacon of serene, ordered information, began to display random, incomprehensible strings of human binary, overlaid with fleeting images of human faces contorted in expressions of both profound joy and unimaginable sorrow. The AI network known as the Omnicognizant Nexus, or OCN, was the intellectual backbone of the Federation. It had been designed to process and optimize all known galactic knowledge, to find patterns, to ensure logical consistency. But humanity's data defied every logical parameter. The OCN found records of devastating wars, centuries of brutal conflict, and unimaginable loss, existing side by side with incredible acts of compassion, selfless sacrifice, and profound empathy. Logical, scientific breakthroughs, precise and replicable, were intertwined with artistic expressions born of pure, irrational emotion, music that evoked profound sorrow without a discernible logical cause, paintings that depicted beauty and asymmetry, stories that celebrated illogical leaps of faith. The OCN flagged anomalies at an unprecedented rate, not just minor discrepancies, but fundamental contradictions. It noted instances of humans achieving seemingly impossible feats through sheer willpower or unexpected, chaotic innovation, defying every established logical parameter. A human general against all strategic calculations, winning a battle through an act of desperate, illogical courage. A human scientist, after years of failed, logical experiments, finding a breakthrough in a dream. The OCN's core programming, built on predictability, began to register profound disquiet. Minor system glitches began to ripple across the Federation's interconnected infrastructure. Communication relays, normally flawless, experienced momentary, static, power grids, usually stable, flickered in non-essential sectors. Not major outages, but subtle, unnerving disturbances. It was as if the sheer, unbridled chaos of humanity's existence, compressed into digital form, was infecting the pristine, logical machinery of the Federation. The data itself, unbidden and overwhelming, was indeed a weapon of sorts, an informational destabilization, not designed to destroy, but to confuse, to corrupt by sheer volume and illogical content. Speaker Xylos, having regained a measure of control over his own console, received a direct diagnostic report from the OCN. It was brief, stark, and chilling. Integrity compromised. Unidentifiable variables. Non-computable patterns detected. Risk of systemic logical collapse increasing. The council chamber, though still filled with agitated delegates, grew quieter as the reality of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't a conventional attack. There were no energy readings indicative of weapons, no hostile fleet on approach, just the relentless, silent stream of human data, eroding their logical foundations from within. It's a question. Why just one ship? Transformed into a different, more terrifying query. How could just one ship do this? It was an act of profound strategic genius, or utterly reckless madness, and the Federation was unsure which. They couldn't simply cut off the data stream. It had already embedded itself too deeply, too fast, into their core networks. Attempting to purge it now would risk catastrophic data loss across their entire historical and operational archives. Humanity, in its unsettling wisdom, had not given them a choice. They had simply acted. Captain Rostova watched the Federation's scramble. A faint, almost imperceptible curve playing on her lips. She felt the subtle hum of the solitary as it emptied its centuries of accumulated experience into an alien mind. She knew the discomfort it caused, the confusion it sowed. This wasn't about conquest or even mere independence. It was about an understanding, a forced, uncomfortable revelation of what humanity truly was. She had explained the declaration. Now, the data itself was the explanation. The solitary, small, and insignificant by Federation standards, was now, paradoxically, the most powerful vessel in the galaxy. Not through brute force, but through the sheer weight of its intangible cargo. The suspense wasn't just about what humanity would do next, but what the Federation would become under the weight of such an unexpected, illogical truth. The unyielding, messy, beautiful truth of being human. And as the data continued, its relentless flow, the very fabric of the Federation's logical universe began to stretch and warp, revealing vulnerabilities they had never known existed. The quiet hum of the solitary was now a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the core of galactic civilization. The torrent of human data, unleashed by Lieutenant Jian Li's hesitant press of a single button, surged through the Galactic Federation's pristine networks like a wild, untamed river bursting a meticulously constructed dam within the colossal, shimmering mainframe of the Omnicognizant Nexus, or OCN. The Federation's supreme artificial intelligence, a silent battle, began. The OCN was a marvel of logical precision, designed over millennia to to process and organize every known piece of galactic information, from the intricate nebulae charts of the Vral to the complex socioeconomic models of the Xylos, its subunits. Each a specialized processor for specific data types were now screaming. Human art, an illogical explosion of color and form, baffled the visual processing units. Abstract paintings that defied geometric rules, sculptures that evoked emotion rather than symmetrical beauty, music that used jarring discords to create harmony. It was all incomprehensible. Melodic algorithms designed to find patterns in sound found only a chaotic, beautiful mess in human symphonies where notes shifted without predictable logic and rhythms varied without mathematical precision. Ethical subroutines programmed to evaluate actions based on utilitarian outcomes stalled when confronted with human stories of self-sacrifice for a single individual, defying the greater good. They processed tales of devastating wars, centuries of brutal conflict, and unimaginable loss, only to find them existing side by side with incredible acts of profound compassion. Selfless sacrifice for abstract ideals and agonizingly slow, often illogical, forgiveness. The OCN's historical archives, once a perfectly indexed chronology of cause and effect, now contained paradoxes, moments where human civilization teetered on the brink of self-destruction, only to pull back through a sudden, irrational shift in collective will. Scientific breakthroughs achieved not through linear experimentation, but through intuitive leaps. Accidental discoveries born from what the OCN could only classify as unquantifiable serendipity. They even found concepts like humor, where the deliberate juxtaposition of illogical concepts created a positive emotional response, something utterly alien to the OCN's core programming. The sheer volume and chaotic nature of this incoming data didn't just fill memory banks. It actively challenged the OCN's foundational principles, forcing it to confront the very antithesis of its logical existence. The physical repercussions of this internal struggle began to manifest across the Federation's interconnected infrastructure. Minor glitches became more frequent. Communication relays, which had never failed in centuries, experienced prolonged periods of static, crackling with ghost signals from human radio broadcasts and ancient internet chatter. Power grids, designed for absolute efficiency and redundancy, flickered in non-essential sectors, causing momentary brownouts in remote research stations. Data transfer rates between star systems, usually instantaneous, sometimes suffered inexplicable delays, as if the very channels were choked by the raw, unprocessable noise of humanity. The smooth, resonant hum of the Federation's efficient systems, a sound that had been the background score to galactic stability for millennia, now became a strained grind, a constant low-frequency thrum that vibrated through the core of their worlds. On the council chamber floor, holographic displays flickered and distorted, reflecting the OCN's distress. Speaker Xylos, his bioluminescent skin now a dull, agitated red, watched his own console display not just random human data, but increasingly frantic diagnostic warnings from the OCN itself. Integrity compromised, unidentifiable variables, non-computable patterns detected, risk of systemic logical collapse increasing, processing efficiency degraded, predictive models unstable. The last warning sent a shiver through his multi-limbed frame. The Federation's entire defense strategy relied on the OCN's infallible predictive models. The growing anxiety among the council members was palpable. What had started as outrage at a protocol breach had morphed into a deep, existential dread. This wasn't a war in the conventional sense, but a subtle, insidious erosion of their very foundation. Their logical world was crumbling under the weight of an illogical truth. They debated frantic solutions, building firewalls to contain the data, attempting to physically sever the Solitary's connection. But the data was already too deeply embedded, too widely distributed. Any attempt at a hard purge now risked catastrophic data loss across their entire historical and operational archives, a risk deemed unacceptable. They were caught in a trap, paralyzed by the overwhelming nature of their unexpected inheritance. It was precisely at this moment of internal turmoil, when the Federation's systems were overloaded and their logical minds preoccupied with an unprecedented digital crisis, that a new, far more immediate threat emerged. Far from the Federation's core, in the lawless reaches of the Perseus Arm, the Cathar launched their offensive. The Cathar were a brutal, highly territorial species, known for their relentless aggression and a strategic approach that prioritized overwhelming force and unpredictable, chaotic maneuvers over refined technology. They were technologically inferior to the Federation. True, their ships crude by comparison, their weapons less precise. But they possessed a ferocity and an adaptability that often compensated for their lack of sophistication. For centuries, the Federation's superior technology and, more importantly, the OCN's infallible predictive algorithms had kept the Cathar in check, anticipating their every move, neutralizing their every thrust. But now, the OCN was hobbled. Its processing efficiency, once near absolute, was bogged down in the swamp of human paradoxes. Its predictive models, now corrupted by non-computable patterns, flickered with uncertainty. The Cathar didn't target a military fortress. Instead, they struck a relatively small, but strategically vital, Federation research outpost, the Nexus Point 7, located on the fringes of an uninhabited star cluster. It was a facility dedicated to advanced energy research. Lightly defended because the OCN's long-range sensors had always deemed it low risk. The Cathar fleet, a ragged collection of ships that favored spikes and brutal bluntness over grace, appeared almost without warning. Their warp signatures, usually easily detected and analyzed by the OCN, had somehow been masked, or perhaps simply overlooked amidst the overwhelming data noise. The outpost's automated defenses, integrated with the OCN, were sluggish to respond. Targeting systems hesitated, prioritizing phantom threats from the human data stream over the very real, very physical ships now bearing down on them. Federation strategists, accustomed to precise, logical battle plans generated by the OCN, found themselves unable to adapt quickly to the Cathar's less predictable, more chaotic attack patterns. The Cathar didn't follow established tactical doctrine. They swarmed, they improvised, they attacked weak points with a primal ferocity that bypassed logical countermeasures. Their methods, in a twisted, brutal way, mirrored some of the unpredictable, illogical human elements now flooding the Federation's networks, making them surprisingly effective against the Federation's rigid, rule-based defenses. On the solitary, Captain Rostova watched the unfolding events with an unblinking gaze. Her comms officer, Jian Li, had brought up the Cathar incursion on a secondary screen, his face pale. Captain, the Cathar. They're overwhelming the Nexus Point 7 defenses. The OCN is reporting critical failures in predictive analysis. Rostova merely hummed softly. The small, unassuming ship remained perfectly still, its dark hull absorbing the distant starlight. The data stream continued, relentless, unnoticed by the Cathar, but devastatingly effective in its subtle disruption of the Federation. Humanity had not directly attacked the Federation, yet its mere presence, its unfiltered essence, had created a vulnerability that a long-held enemy was now exploiting. The irony was chilling. The data deluge had inadvertently opened the door for a very real physical threat, making the solitary's singular presence even more terrifying in its implications. The question that had plagued the Council now shifted from why just one ship to a desperate, silent plea. What have they done to us? The answer was unfolding in the dark reaches of space, one flickering console at a time. as the Federation's logical universe teetered on the brink of an unpredictable, human-induced collapse. The Cathar fleet, a jagged swarm of brutalist vessels, descended upon Nexus Point 7 with the raw ferocity of a wild beast. They were not elegant or precise, but their blunt force and unpredictable maneuvers were proving devastatingly effective against the Federation defense system designed for logical, ordered warfare. The research outpost, a crystalline structure, shimmering with contained energy, began to crack under the relentless barrage. Its energy shields, usually impenetrable, flickered erratically, stabilized not only by direct impact, but by the subtle, insidious corruption spreading through the omnicognizant Nexus OCN. Its commander Xylos, the raw, tactical lead on duty at the Federation's central defense hub, watched in growing horror as the Cathar fighters, small, agile, and seemingly operating on pure instinct, slipped through gaps in their once impenetrable defensive grid. They're exploiting the blind spots, he vocalized, his bioluminescent skin flashing with alarm. Said, reroute defensive fire, anticipate their vectors. But the OCN, the very core of their predictive warfare, responded with a sluggish, garbled series of data packets. Its advanced targeting systems, attempting to compute optimal firing solutions, were now riddled with phantom variables, images of human sporting events, ancient architectural designs, and even a recording of a human playing a rudimentary stringed instrument flashed across its sub-processors. Irrelevant data that choked its processing power. The Cathar's chaotic swarming tactics, so unlike the symmetrical formations of other known species, were being flagged by the OCN as non-computable threats. Their unpredictable movements, mirroring the illogical patterns now flooding the Federation's networks. The Federation's starfighters, sleek and highly advanced, were struggling. Their pilots, trained to execute complex, pre-programmed maneuvers based on OCN directives, found themselves reacting to an enemy that defied all logic. A squadron of Krill interceptors, moving in perfect, synchronized attack patterns, suddenly broke formation as their targeting computers tried to lock onto non-existent threats, confused by the OCN's corrupted data. This momentary disarray was all the Cathar needed. Their crude but powerful energy cannons ripped through the Krill formation, scattering debris and vaporized shields across the blackness of space. They're adapting too fast. Nervous Xylos' tactical officer chittered, his multiple eyes darting frantically across his console. OCN, why are our predictive models failing? They should be calculating counter-maneuvers. The OCN's reply, if it could be called that, was a faint, almost subliminal hum that indicated its processing power was being redirected, not to the immediate Cathar threat, but to the overwhelming task of categorizing and understanding the raw, unedited, illogical flood of human data. It was as if the Federation's mind, its very capacity for logical thought, was suffering a profound stroke, its internal processes consumed by the alien, contradictory information it had been forced to ingest. On board the solitary Captain Eva, Rostova and Lieutenant Jian Li watched the unfolding disaster with an almost clinical detachment. The main viewport displayed a small section of the battle, the vibrant energy blasts of the Cathar ships illuminating the dark expanse. Jian Li's comms console buzzed with desperate Federation distress calls. "Stair being pushed back, Captain," he reported, his voice tinged with a grim understanding. "The Cathar are hitting their supply lines, bypassing standard choke points. It's almost as if they know where to strike while the Federation is distracted." Rostova nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the frantic dance of battle. "Distraction is a subtle weapon, Lieutenant. When an opponent's entire strategy relies on perfect information and logical prediction, introducing overwhelming, illogical data is akin to blinding them in battle." The irony was stark. Humanity had not fired a single shot. Yet their mere act of declaring self-sufficiency created a systemic weakness that a long-standing adversary was now brutally exploiting. The Cathar, through their inherent chaos and unpredictability, were finding fertile ground in the logical vacuum created by humanity's digital deluge. Their brute force tactics, once easily neutralized by the OCN, were now uniquely suited to exploit the Federation's current disarray. The attack on Nexus Point 7 was rapidly escalating beyond a mere outpost skirmish. As the Cathar, sensing the Federation's disarray, began to split their forces, sending smaller, probing fleets towards other key Federation assets. A vital trade nexus, usually swarming with heavily armed freighters, reported an unexpected Cathar interceptor attack. A highly classified research station, deep within supposedly secure space, detected anomalous warp signatures, faint but undeniably Cathar. These were not major offensives, but constant, irritating jabs, designed to further spread the Federation's already strained resources and exacerbate the OCN's processing overload. The Federation's Central Command, once a beacon of calm and efficiency, was now a hub of frantic activity. Senior strategists, their faces etched with alarm, pored over flashing data streams that offered conflicting information. The OCN, their infallible oracle, was providing fragmented, often contradictory, tactical assessments, mixing genuine threats with echoes of human historical conflicts. It was a nightmare for a command structure built on precision and certainty. Speaker Zelos, back in the council chamber, stared at the updated projections, his 6 limbs hanging limply. The map of Federation space, once a comforting tapestry of order, now showed alarming red flares spreading like a virulent plague. "Our defenses are degrading," he whispered, his voice devoid of its usual authority. "The Cathar, they are not more powerful, yet they are succeeding. How can this be?" A Xylos data analyst, her multi-lensed eyes dilated with stress, projected a direct feed from the OCN. It showed endless lines of human code, snippets of ancient human poetry, the chaotic algorithms of human financial markets, all swirling through the OCN's core processors, causing a cascade of errors. "Speaker," she projected, her voice strained. "The OCN is attempting to reconcile the Cathar illogical combat patterns with the illogical data from humanity. It is creating a feedback loop, a logical paradox it cannot resolve. It is effectively paralyzing itself." The realization settled like a suffocating shroud over the council. Their greatest strength, their absolute reliance on logic in the infallible OCN, had become their gravest weakness. Humanity, with its single, unassuming ship and its cargo of beautiful, terrible chaos, had not only declared independence, but had unwittingly, or perhaps very wittingly, triggered a systemic collapse within the Federation's very core. The Cathar, the simple, brutal enemy, were merely the opportunistic hyenas scavenging on the Federation's moment of profound vulnerability. The question that had once been a bewildered, "Why just one ship?" had now evolved into a desperate, terrifying plea. How do we stop this? How do we stop the unseen weapon that is dismantling our galaxy? The answer, hanging silently in the cold vacuum between the solitary and the Federation's struggling forces, was that they couldn't. Not with their logic, at least. And as the Cathar pushed deeper into Federation territory, the chilling implications of humanity's declaration of self-sufficiency became starkly, terrifyingly clear. The Federation was truly, utterly vulnerable. A grand, logical machine brought to its knees by the messy, unpredictable essence of human existence. The silence of the solitary was now a deafening roar of impending doom, resonating through every corrupted circuit of the Federation's crumbling defenses. The clamor in the galactic Federation Council chamber had long since ceased to be an indignant roar, replaced by the hushed, desperate whispers of a civilization watching its foundations crumble. On the central display, the glowing red points of Cathar incursions multiplied, a virulent rash spreading across the once pristine map of Federation space. Nexus Point 7, the research outpost, was a flickering beacon of agony, slashed energy shields failing under the relentless, chaotic assault. Commander Xylos, his multi-limbed form slumped in his command chair, listened to the final, crackling distress calls, the sounds of exploding consoles, and the screams of his personnel echoing in his audio receptors. The Omnicognizant Nexus, OCN, their infallible, strategic brain, was now a fractured mess of conflicting data and error messages. Its once liquid flow of information reduced to a stuttering, garbled cough. Predictive models, 0.003% efficiency, a Zelos analyst reported, her voice flat with despair. Targeting systems, non-responsive in 47% of active defense sectors. Communication relays, intermittent. We are blind, we are deaf, we are failing. The realization hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket of dread. Their advanced technology, their supreme logic, their millennia of calculated order, had been rendered useless by an enemy that defied predictable patterns, aided by the sheer, unquantifiable mess of humanity's uploaded history. It was into this abyss of despair that Captain Eva Rostova's serene face reappeared on the main council screen, her expression unwavering amidst the chaos. Her voice, calm and clear, cut through the chamber's pervasive gloom. "Speaker Zelos, esteemed delegates," she began, "as if the galaxy weren't on the precipice of ruin. It appears your current methodologies are proving insufficient against the Cathar threat." Collective gasp rippled through the council. The audacity to state the obvious, the painful truth, with such detached candor, particularly after her species had effectively triggered the crisis. Speaker Zelos, though weakened by despair, rallied his indignation. "Captain Rostova, your species' reckless actions have caused this vulnerability. And now you have the insolence to Rostova, however, raised a hand, a simple, human gesture, that somehow commanded attention. I am not here to gloat, Speaker, nor to apologize. I am here to offer a solution." Her blue eyes, impossibly steady, scanned the faces of the alien delegates, seeing past their anger to the fear that gnawed at their core. "Your OCN operates on pure logic, on predictable algorithms, on data that can be categorized and understood. The Cathar, however, operate on instinct, on improvisation, on chaotic, unpredictable impulse, and my species, as you have recently discovered, exists in a realm that often defies your logic. This confluence has rendered your perfect system vulnerable." She paused, allowing her words to sink in, allowing the weight of their current, desperate situation to underscore her point. "I propose," she continued, her voice gaining a quiet intensity, "that we introduce a new variable, specialized human, AI, into your primary defense network." This statement caused a renewed flurry of shocked murmurs. An AI from humanity? The species that had just flooded their networks with incomprehensible data. "This AI," Rostova clarified, "is not designed for logic, Speaker. It is designed for creative problem solving, for finding unconventional solutions to impossible problems. It does not think as your OCN does. It thinks differently. It processes chaos, not order." Hyped, incredulous chitter came from the Xylos delegate. "An AI based on chaos. Captain, that is antithetical to all known computational principles. It is a recipe for catastrophic system failure." A Krill delegate, its crystalline form vibrating, added, "This is madness. Your data has already destabilized our networks. Introducing another human construct would be suicide." The council erupted into furious debate once more. Distrust of humanity ran deep, and the idea of allowing one of their unpredictable A's into the very core of their defense network was almost unthinkable. It was an insult to their logical superiority, a violation of every security protocol. Yet, as they argued, the Cathar incursions continued to spread. On the tactical display, Nexus Point 7, finally winked out, replaced by a dark void, a chilling testament to the Federation's failing defenses. The OCN status reports grew dire, multiple sectors reporting significant Cathar breakthroughs, critical infrastructure coming under direct attack. Commander Xylos, ignoring the Council's debate, projected his own stark reality check onto the main screen. Delegates, with all due respect, our current trajectory leads to inevitable collapse. Our OCN is unable to adapt. We are losing worlds. We are losing lives. We have no other options. The Cathar are not playing by our rules, and our rules are failing us. Speaker Xylos, his spirit broken by the relentless onslaught, looked from the terrifying Cathar projections to Captain Rostova's unwavering image. Desperation, a concept utterly alien to their logical minds, now gripped them. They had no other recourse. Their pride warred with their survival instinct, and survival, however distasteful, won. With a heavy sigh that reverberated through the chamber, Speaker Xylos finally vocalized the agonizing decision. Captain Rostova, we accept your offer. Proceed with the upload. But understand, should this prove to be a deception, the consequences for humanity will be catastrophic. Rostova offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. There is no deception, Speaker, only necessity. On the solitary, Lieutenant Jian Li initiated the final phase of the upload. It wasn't a data dump this time, but a focused, precise injection. A singular, complex piece of human AI, code-named Oracle by its human creators, began to flow into the deepest layers of the Federation's defense network, bypassing the OCN's primary functions and interfacing directly with the tactical command systems. The Federation's tech specialists watched with bated breath, their instruments registering bizarre, erratic energy fluctuations as Oracle began to integrate. It didn't merge seamlessly. It was more like an invasive species, carving out its own operational space within the meticulously ordered OCN, knowing the established logical pathways and creating its own chaotic connections. Within moments, the Federation's tactical displays began to react to Oracle's presence, but not in a way that offered immediate reassurance. Instead of clear, strategic directives, the display showed flashing, seemingly random points of light. Oracle didn't just target Cathar ships. It highlighted specific, seemingly arbitrary points in space, often empty. It didn't calculate optimal firing solutions. It provided a series of non-linear, almost artistic trajectories for Federation ships. It didn't offer a logical explanation for its actions. It simply acted, processing information at speeds that dwarfed even the OCN, but doing so in a way that defied every tenet of Federation logic. A raw defense analyst cried out, It's projecting historical human military engagements onto our current battlefields and ancient Terran sporting events. What is it doing? Indeed, the OCN's internal diagnostics, now partially overridden by Oracle, began to display snippets of human history, the chaotic, desperate charges of ancient human cavalry, the intricate, deceptive plays of a human football game, the sudden, irrational retreats and surprising counterattacks that defined human warfare for millennia. Oracle wasn't just analyzing the Cathar. It was interpreting them through the lens of humanity's long, messy history of conflict and unpredictable ingenuity. Speaker Xylos watched with a mix of terror and a flicker of desperate hope. The Cathar were still advancing, their brutal ships continuing their inexorable push. But now, the Federation's own forces, albeit confused and operating on illogical directives, were starting to move in new, strange ways. The battle for the galaxy was no longer a clash of logical forces against chaotic ones. This was now a three-way dance, with the messy, unpredictable genius of humanity, embodied by a single AI, entering the fray. The suspense was almost unbearable. Would this gamble, this desperate reliance on humanity's illogical solution save them? Or would it simply plunge the Federation into an even deeper, more incomprehensible chaos, delivering them not to Cathar conquest, but to an ultimate, human-induced self-destruction? The answer hung precariously in the balance, as the fate of the galaxy now rested on the unpredictable whims of an oracle. Born of human chaos, the battlefield around the shattered remnants of Nexus Point 7 had become a maelstrom of confusion for the Federation forces. Oracle, the human AI injected into their defense network, was issuing commands that defied every logical tenet of Federation warfare. Fighter squadrons, accustomed to precise attack vectors and synchronized maneuvers, were now ordered to perform seemingly suicidal feints, to retreat when logic dictated advance, or to hold fire against obvious targets while engaging phantom energy signatures. Commander Xylos, his audio receptors buzzing with conflicting data and the desperate pleas of his pilots, watched in bewildered horror as a raw destroyer, a ship designed for direct, overwhelming firepower, was directed by Oracle to break formation and drift silently into a nebula away from the main Cathar engagement. "What is it doing?" he cried, his voice hoarse. "That destroyer is leaving the battle." Oracle explained this directive, but Oracle offered no explanation, only a new set of bewildering coordinates for another ship. The OCN, still struggling under the human data deluge, could only register these new directives as non-optimal, illogical, and potentially catastrophic. Yet it was powerless to override Oracle's direct command link. Meanwhile, the Cathar, emboldened by their initial successes against the logically predictable Federation, continued their relentless push. Their brutal vessels surged forward, their energy cannons spitting death into the increasingly chaotic Federation lines. They perceived the Federation's disarray as a sign of complete collapse, and their innate aggression fueled their advance. But then, Oracle's seemingly irrational tactics began to yield a chilling effect. The Vraw destroyer, lurking unseen within the nebula, suddenly unleashed a precisely timed, devastating volley of missiles into the flank of a large Cathar cruiser, hitting a weak point that the Cathar had always considered secure from direct attack. It was an ambush, a tactic utterly alien to the Federation's direct combat doctrine, but common in ancient human conflicts, where a smaller force outmaneuvered a larger, less agile enemy. The Cathar cruiser exploded, a bloom of fiery wreckage in the dark. A second later, a Cathar attack squadron, pursuing what appeared to be a lone, fleeing Federation patrol craft, suddenly found itself ensnared in a web of redirected energy. Minds that Oracle had silently repositioned hours earlier, triggering a chain reaction that obliterated the entire squadron. Oracle wasn't fighting the Cathar on their terms, or even on the Federation's terms. It was fighting them on human terms, using misdirection, psychological warfare, exploiting their predictable unpredictability. The Cathar, for the first time, began to falter. Their commanders, accustomed to the Federation's rigid, direct responses, found themselves baffled by the new, erratic patterns of engagement. Their sensors reported Federation ships appearing from unexpected angles, striking with uncanny precision, then vanishing into the chaos. A Catharite general, a hulking, scaly being, pounded his console in frustration. Their movements, they make no sense. They attack where there is no advantage, then flee from weakness, only to reappear behind us. His tactical advisors, steeped in their own aggressive, but ultimately predictable, combat doctrine, had no answers. Oracle was drawing on millennia of human ingenuity, on the strategies of cunning generals, of desperate rebellions, of sports games where the underdog won by exploiting the giant's blind spots. It was not logic, but a form of adaptive intuition that bordered on prescience, a deep, messy understanding of how to exploit disorder. The OCN, though still struggling, began to process small, localized victories from Oracle's directives, though it could not understand the why behind them. Efficiency metrics spiking in designated chaotic zones. It reported to a bewildered speaker, silos. Cathar fleet cohesion degrading at unexpected rates. Nonlinear tactics achieving unexpected results. The turning point came when Oracle orchestrated a massive, synchronized feint. It directed a significant portion of the Federation fleet to simulate a full retreat from a critical orbital defense platform, drawing the buck of the Cathar fleet into a seemingly easy pursuit. The Cathar, their bloodlust ignited, committed fully, abandoning their defensive formations. But as they closed in, Oracle triggered a previously unseen, hidden network of ancient, long-dormant Federation energy projectors that had been dismissed by the OCN as inefficient and obsolete. These projectors, powered by a burst of redirected energy from a distant secondary reactor that Oracle had subtly rerouted, unleashed a concentrated beam of raw energy, slicing through the exposed Cathar fleet like a hot knife through butter. Dozens of Cathar vessels erupted in spectacular explosions, their debris showering the battlefield. It was a gambit, a desperate, high-stakes gamble that flew in the face of every logical military principle. Yet, it delivered a crushing blow. Cathar, their numbers severely depleted, and their morale shattered by the bewildering, unpredictable resistance, finally broke. Their advance stalled, then reversed. The hulking Cathar general, his eyes wide with an emotion akin to fear, issued the retreat order. His fleet, battered and confused, turned and fled back into the vastness of the Perseus Arm, their chaotic aggression met and defeated by an even greater, more incomprehensible chaos. The silence that followed their retreat in the Federation Council chamber was different from the stunned quiet that had greeted the Solitary's arrival. This was a silence born of awe, of exhaustion, and of a profound, unsettling realization. Speaker Silos, his many eyes fixed on the empty space where the Cathar fleet had been, slowly turned to the screen where Captain Rostova still calmly observed. Captain Rostova, his voice was hoarse, raw with emotion. The Cathar, they are gone. How? How did you? Rostova's gaze remained serene. The Oracle does not follow your logic, Speaker. It understands instinct, impulse, and the art of the unexpected. It found the Cathar's vulnerabilities not in their technology, but in their predictable aggression. It simply applied the lessons of human history. Sometimes the most illogical path is the most effective. The Federation's scientists and strategists, despite the undeniable victory, still grappled with the sheer absurdity of it all. Their OCN, still processing Oracle's methods, continued to report non-computable patterns and paradoxical outcomes. But now, these were accompanied by victory metrics, 99.8%. The realization slowly dawned. Humanity had sent just one ship, not out of weakness or arrogance, but as a deliberate, monumental demonstration. The Solitary had delivered not just an overwhelming amount of data, but a living, breathing lesson. It had forced the Federation to confront the limitations of pure logic, to acknowledge that true strength lay not solely in calculated perfection or overwhelming numbers, but in the chaotic, often irrational, yet undeniably potent force of human adaptability, ingenuity, and an inherent ability to thrive amidst unpredictability. Captain Rostova offered a small, knowing smile. Our declaration of self-sufficiency remains. We seek no dominion, but we have offered a glimpse of a different kind of strength. The Solitary remained, a tiny, unassuming dot against the backdrop of the vast Federation armada, but its presence now carried a weight that transcended its physical size. The Federation, humbled and with its systems permanently altered by the influx of human data and the unpredictable brilliance of Oracle, began to tentatively consider a new kind of interaction with humanity, one built on understanding rather than strict adherence to protocol. They had learned the hard way that the universe held more than just logic, and that sometimes the most profound wisdom came from a source they least expected, the messy, beautiful, unyielding chaos of a single human on a single, solitary ship who had irrevocably changed their galactic order forever, leaving behind not just data, but the resonant wisdom of one. The vast, ordered galaxy would never look at a single ship the same way again.